Hey there. Awesome to have you here. If it's your first time on the channel, make sure to subscribe and share this video. Let me know in the comments what city or country you're in. I truly appreciate every single message. Let's jump in. Each daybreak found Orla Bradshaw waking beside Noah, wrapped in a quiet contentment she had come to associate with seasoned love. Their mornings unfolded in familiar patterns: shared coffee, casual discussions about the day ahead, and a parting kiss before they went their separate ways to work. Noah held a secure role as an IT manager for a moderately sized company, while Orla was steadily building her reputation in architecture, contributing to notable urban projects. From the outside, their life together seemed effortlessly harmonious, a rhythm built on years of shared understanding and comforting predictability. But, as is often the case, the first signs of tension appeared subtly, almost imperceptibly. It began when Noah started posing seemingly benign questions about Caleb, Orla's childhood friend. He'd occasionally ask, "You two still talk every day?" Or comment offhandedly, "He always seems to call around this time." Orla would answer with a soft chuckle, reiterating what she had always believed to be true. Her connection with Caleb was entirely innocent. Their friendship had endured for years, constant and unthreatening. She assured Noah that his presence in her life never challenged the sanctity of their marriage. Noah appeared to accept this, yet something shifted in his expression, a silent, unsettled look that lingered. He grew more watchful, paying attention to notification alerts, lingering glances, and how often Caleb's name surfaced. Mealtimes became quieter, with silence beginning to stretch uncomfortably between them. Gradually, Orla noticed even casual mentions of Caleb seemed to unsettle Noah, and eventually, the tension surfaced. One evening, without warning, Noah set down his fork and calmly stated that boundaries had been crossed. He questioned whether it was appropriate for a married woman to maintain such close ties with another man. This wasn't jealousy, he said. It was about dignity and respect. His words landed like a judgment. Orla defended herself, insisting she had always been open and had nothing to hide. She could have been secretive, but chose honesty. That had always been her compass. Still, Noah stood his ground. He asked her to block Caleb, not as a demand, he said, but as proof that their marriage came first. Orla sat frozen, absorbing the ultimatum. Part of her understood his discomfort, but another part recoiled at the idea that agreeing would mean giving up a part of herself, her identity before she became Noah's wife. That internal conflict quietly began to erode what had once felt unshakable. Their conversations grew strained. Orla chose her words cautiously. Noah, in response, withdrew behind silences more powerful than any argument. They didn't argue often, but the distance between them widened, unmistakably. Orla began turning away from him at night. Though Noah still occupied the same bed, his presence felt farther away than ever before. Then, one night, he broke the silence with a question. Had she made a choice? She responded with one of her own. "Are you asking me to choose between you and someone who's been in my life since I was a child?" He paused before replying that it wasn't an ultimatum. He just needed clarity. He needed to know if he still mattered most. Orla averted her gaze, not out of lack of love, but out of fear. Fear of a fight that neither of them knew how to finish. 2 days later, Noah came home early, packed a small bag, and told her he'd be staying with his sister for a bit. He needed some space, he said. Everything felt too heavy, and he didn't see how they could keep going like this. Orla stood speechless, trying to form words that refused to come. But it was clear. His mind was already made up. As he walked out, he took with him the sense of stability she had once clung to. That evening, Orla wandered through the hushed rooms of their home. She paused by the couch where they used to curl up and watch shows, glanced at the hallway chair where Noah's jacket always hung, noticed his favorite mug still in the sink. Each detail echoed with his absence. She reached for her phone, opened her chat with Caleb, and stared at the screen. After a moment, she typed, Can you come over? I just need someone to talk to. She wasn't looking for advice, just presence. She needed someone who wouldn't demand explanations, someone who remembered the version of her that existed before this heartache. A few minutes later, Caleb responded, he'd be there soon. Orla settled into the couch, closing her eyes. For the first time, she realized her life no longer felt like her own. And worse, she wasn't sure when she'd let that happen. Her emotions were a mess of contradictions. She still loved Noah deeply, but something inside her longed to be acknowledged. To have her feelings understood without constant justification. She wanted to be seen as herself, not just someone's partner. Caleb arrived a little after 9. From the moment she sent that message, she had been waiting, nerves simmering beneath her skin. When the doorbell rang, a weight pressed against her chest. She knew instinctively that something was about to shift. Opening the door, her smile was faint, more an act of holding herself together than an expression of joy. Caleb said nothing at first. He simply pulled her into a tight embrace like he could keep her from breaking apart by holding her close. They sat on the couch, the television murmuring in the background, a filler for the quiet. Orla tried to make small talk, but every word felt burdened. Caleb just listened. His silence was not avoidance, but attentiveness. He had always known when to speak, and when his presence alone was enough. That night, all she truly longed for was the presence of someone, anyone, who wouldn't ask her to explain. She opened up to him, revealing that Noah had left, that it all unraveled after he issued his ultimatums about her friendship with Caleb, and that she had felt completely helpless to change the course of events. Now, she was left trying to make sense of how quickly everything had fallen apart. Caleb ran his fingers through his hair, lost in thought. He confessed that a part of him had always dreaded becoming a burden in her life, though he never quite knew how to avoid that fate. She rejected the idea without hesitation, telling him he bore no responsibility. The blame, she said, lay with her, for avoiding the tough conversations, for pretending things were stable when they weren't. Her voice trembled, and tears gathered in her eyes. Not because of what she admitted aloud, but for all that remained unsaid, the pain of losing someone she once loved, the regret of not truly listening to Noah, and the shame of finding comfort in the very person Noah had feared. Caleb gently took her hand. She didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture that once symbolized only friendship. Now it carried something unspoken. They shared a brief look, wordless but loaded with meaning. It wasn't a look charged with desire, but it had lost its innocence. It was an unspoken acknowledgement between two emotionally bruised people, seeking solace amid the debris of something that used to be whole. He leaned toward her, cautiously. Orla hesitated. Her thoughts darted to Noah, his warnings, his pleas, the arguments that ended with him leaving. She remembered the chaos, the suitcase hastily filled with goodbye. And she thought of how often she had chosen silence instead of confrontation, choosing calm over honesty. The kiss that followed was tender and unsure, laced with unspoken sorrow. There was no premeditation, no grand design, only a raw impulse to escape the emptiness. The kiss deepened, and in a room still echoing with the remnants of a love that had broken, Orla and Caleb crossed a line neither had intended to. By morning, she stirred to find him still asleep beside her. His face was calm, almost as if he believed this could be the beginning of something new. But within her, something cracked. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she buried her face in her hands, trying to pinpoint the moment when everything inside her had begun to unravel. She dressed quietly, careful not to disturb him. In the dim light of the living room, she sat alone on the couch, staring into nothing. Her thoughts spiraled. What had happened was irreversible. And worst of all, it hadn't come from love. It had sprung from confusion, from a desperate hunger to feel connected. Noah's words about loyalty rang in her ears again. They had once seemed harsh, now they felt hauntingly accurate. How could she explain, even to herself, that after everything Noah had asked of her, she had done exactly what he'd feared the most? Caleb appeared shortly after, his hair tousled, his face uncertain. He sat beside her and quietly asked if she was okay. Orla didn't answer. She simply gave a vague nod, her eyes distant. He seemed to recognize the weight of her silence and didn't press her. He only said he'd be there if she needed him. But she didn't know how to accept that offer. Part of her wanted to hold on to his presence. Another part was already suffocating under the weight of a boundary crossed, one she knew deep down should have never been breached. Not for Noah's sake, but for her own integrity. When he finally left, the silence in the apartment grew deeper. As the door clicked shut, it felt like something inside her had shut off too. She took a long shower, then returned to the bed where the night had unfolded and lay flat, staring at the ceiling. The thought of calling Noah crossed her mind, but what could she possibly say? That he'd been right? That she'd broken a vow she once swore she'd keep? That she hadn't only lost him, but had fractured a friendship that had lasted for years? She felt hollow, as if every choice she'd made that night came with a price far beyond what she was prepared to pay. Sleep never came. Her mind kept replaying every detail, the touches, the words, the silence between them. That night, Orla didn't cry. The tears would arrive eventually. What she felt instead was something far heavier, a numbness that pressed into her chest like a weight she couldn't move, like being trapped in a waking nightmare. But it wasn't a nightmare. It was real. She had betrayed someone she once loved, and in that betrayal, she had also lost part of herself. That was a wound no apology could mend. In the days that followed, Orla drifted through life in a haze. She showed up at the office, attended meetings, completed her assignments, but her mind never stayed in the present. Guilt clung to her like a second skin. She didn't tell a soul what had happened between her and Caleb. Inside, she felt divided. One part of her clung to the idea that it had been a single misstep. The other knew it was something far more complicated than she was ready to face. At home, everything looked the same, but the silence was different, heavier, more suffocating than before. Time began to move in a strange cadence, as if every passing second was gently steering Orla toward a moment she couldn't undo. She gradually pulled away from Caleb, answering his messages with detached, clipped replies. She made up excuses to avoid seeing him, deleted his number from her favorites, and sidestepped anything that could remind her of his presence. What truly unnerved her wasn't the chance of running into him. It was the fear of what might awaken inside her if she did. More than anything, it was the unbearable weight of guilt pressing on her. Not the kind that could be eased with an apology or written off as a fleeting lapse in judgment. This was the heavy, enduring kind. To distract herself, she immersed in chores around the house, emptying closets of neglected clothes, organizing books to donate, dragging dusty boxes from the spare bedroom that hadn't been touched in years. She told herself it was all in the name of productivity, but deep down she knew. She was excavating the most wounded corners of her life. And that's when she found it, a black notebook, thick and weathered, tucked away at the back of Noah's nightstand drawer. Its edges were worn, its cover well used. She figured it was filled with everyday lists or notes. Curious, she flipped it open, expecting reminders or grocery plans. But the truth leapt off the pages almost instantly. It was a journal, raw, private, each entry marked with dates. Line after line held reflections, confessions, the kind of feelings rarely spoken aloud. Orla's heart raced as she flipped through more pages. Her name appeared, sporadically but unmistakably. Before she could pause to decide whether reading on was right, she was already deep in its contents. That's how she discovered that Noah, long before she entered his life, had been betrayed. A former partner he had trusted had been unfaithful, someone he'd believed in completely. It hadn't just been a betrayal of love, it had shattered his entire foundation of trust. He had written about the long, painstaking process of trying to believe in people again, about how difficult it had been to open up, how each act of intimacy had required tremendous internal effort. Every page hit her like a blow. She thought of all the times he had expressed discomfort about her closeness with Caleb, the conversations about boundaries, the requests for mutual consideration, and how she had dismissed them as insecurity. It hadn't been jealousy. It had been fear rooted in a wound that had never fully closed. In that moment, Orla saw what she had missed all along. She had failed to honor his pain, not out of malice, but out of carelessness. By brushing off his concerns and disregarding the vulnerability in his voice, she had unknowingly reopened old wounds that had never truly healed. Trembling, she shut the journal and sank to the floor, overcome. She cried, deeply, uncontrollably, not only for the mistake she had made, but for everything she had overlooked. She wept for the man who had dared to trust her, for not hearing the things he never said aloud, for placing her own desires above his emotional well-being, and perhaps most painfully, for recognizing that this kind of self-absorption had marked much of her life. Noah's call came out of the blue, after days of silence. His voice was even, measured, as if he had carefully chosen every word before calling. Orla's stomach tightened as she answered, uncertain whether this was an attempt at peace or the end of everything. He didn't raise his voice. He simply said he wanted to meet. No arguments, no tension, just a conversation. He confessed he didn't have the energy left for conflict. All he wanted was clarity, some peace in the aftermath. She agreed, aware that one wrong sentence could break what little hope remained. When they finally sat face to face, Noah was calm, but there was a guarded pain in his eyes, like a man who had built emotional walls for survival. He spoke first. Said he'd taken time to think, that he had come to the painful conclusion that their relationship had to end, that living in constant doubt had drained him, that he could no longer share his life with someone who made him feel unstable in his own mind. Orla stayed silent until he finished, then took a breath and began. She told him about the journal, that she had found it, that she had read every word, that it had left her broken. She said she hadn't understood the depth of his pain until that moment. At those words, Noah's expression changed. His brow tightened. His voice sharpened as he demanded to know why she had read something so private. He told her it wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes, that he had never given her the right to look. His anger was palpable, and he had every right to it. But as he turned to leave, she reached for his arm, gently stopping him. She said she knew she had crossed a boundary, that she didn't expect to be forgiven, that she wasn't seeking redemption, only that she finally saw, and that she was sorry for seeing too late. She told him the pieces had finally clicked, that she now grasped everything he'd been trying to say all along. She asked for another chance. Said that if life ever forced her to choose again, between the man she married and the friend she couldn't forget, she'd choose him. That's exactly what she was doing now, picking him, even with the risk that it might already be too late. Noah didn't answer right away. The silence between them stretched, long and thick, like time itself had slowed down. Then he looked at her. "Are you certain?" he asked. Orla nodded. Yes. She told him she was ready to start fresh, ready to rebuild everything from the foundation up. Noah took a slow breath before responding. "Okay," he said. "Let's try. I still love you. If you're choosing me now, I'll stay." Just as a flicker of hope crossed her face, she hesitated. Something weighed heavily on her chest, something she couldn't ignore. If she kept this buried, she knew their new beginning would be rooted in the same secrets that once broke them. She lifted her eyes, her voice trembling at first but growing firm. there's something I need to say. The night you left, I slept with Caleb. Noah froze. His face turned expressionless, as if everything inside him had gone still. He stood up slowly, his body moving as if it needed time to catch up with his thoughts. You slept with him? He repeated softly, more like he was trying to hear it for himself. She gave a faint nod, whispered, "Yes." He closed his eyes, took a breath, and when he opened them again, the warmth in them had vanished. "My attorney will get in touch," he said. "I'm going through with the divorce." Then he walked away. No yelling, no dramatics, just the cold, final end of something that had already begun to fall apart. The weeks that followed were still and heavy. The divorce moved quickly, without protest, without attempts to fix anything. Noah signed the paperwork without asking for more. His lawyer took care of everything else. When the final documents came in the mail, Orla held the envelope for a long time, as though willing it to be a nightmare she might wake from. But it wasn't. The marriage was finished, quietly, without reversal. She threw herself into work, hoping the constant motion would drown out the pain. But the nights were different. Her apartment echoed with silence. Every room felt haunted, by his folded jackets, by the mug he always left near the sink, by the tired sighs he let out when he came home. Now, there was only the echo of his absence. And in that silence, she realized what she had truly lost. Not just a husband, but a man who had loved her completely, even while bearing his own burdens. Then, in the middle of that emotional wreckage, Caleb resurfaced. He called, said he needed to speak to her. She agreed, whether out of curiosity or loneliness, she didn't know. When he arrived, his eyes were filled with both hope and hesitation. He told her he'd started therapy, that those past weeks had opened his eyes. That after their night together, everything became clearer. Staring into her eyes, he said, "I've loved you since high school. I just never had the guts to say it. I stayed close, always on the edge. But that night made me sure. You're the one." Orla didn't respond right away. There was a knot tightening in her chest, but it wasn't love. It was fatigue, disillusionment, all the silent years, the missed chances, the things he never said, they came flooding back. And when she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but it held the quiet finality of someone who had finally figured out what they needed. "You had so much time, Caleb. Years. And you waited until everything had fallen apart, until I had nothing left, to tell me this? I'm sorry, but I can't be with someone who only steps forward when there's nothing left to lose. I want someone who shows up before it's too late. Someone who fights for me when there's still something worth saving. That's never been you." Caleb looked down. He seemed to have expected this. He didn't try to argue. He simply thanked her for hearing him out, and left. Noah moved on with quiet dignity. No announcements, no messages sent in the dark hours of the night. He simply moved forward, finally finding the calm he had long needed. As for Orla, there were still tears. Still moments when she played back memories and imagined how things might have gone. But she also began to understand. Healing was part of the journey. She was starting over, slowly, day by day. Caleb kept going to therapy, determined to learn who he really was before trying to be with anyone else. And so the story didn't end in fairy tale fashion, but with truth, with old wounds laid bare, and with each person choosing their own path. Because sometimes, the hardest truths are the ones that finally set us free. And letting go of what we thought we needed is how we begin to discover who we're really meant to be. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you